Cotney Attorneys and Consultants is dedicated to helping the construction industry with legal, business, and safety challenges. Welcome to this week's episode of Law and Mortar with John Kenney and Trent Cotney.
Hey, this is Trent Cotney, CEO of Cotney Attorneys and Consultants. I want to welcome you to another episode of Law and Mortar. As always, I've got John Kenney with me. John, how are you doing?
Doing great, Trent. Glad to be here today. Hope everybody out there is doing well as well.
Yeah, we've got a lot going on. Coming up next week is the International Roofing Expo at Mandalay Bay in Vegas. I know we are going to be flying out. I think both of us are flying out on Monday, different times. And we've got a couple of different speaking things. You and I are on a panel together, and then you're speaking, and then I'm speaking. So it's going to be a busy couple of days for us, and then we're back. But, you know, I kind of want to talk about it. It's interesting because in the last week, there have been a lot of cancellations, and it was kind of surprising. I think, GAF and Carlisle kind of started out saying that they weren't coming over, COVID concerns. And then the dominoes kind of started following one exhibitor after another. We even, had some discussions about what we were going to do. And ultimately, you and I both decided that we would go and make sure that we were there to speak in person. But it's interesting because I think what you are going to see is more and more of this. I think COVID-19 is going to continue to spread. I don't think Delta is the end of it. I think there will be other variants. I think the efficacy of our current vaccines will be less and less, and we'll need boosters. And I think this is here to stay. So I guess, John, before I kind of get into talking a little bit more about vaccines, what are your thoughts on what's happened, sort of the monumental news over the last week with IRE, and what do you think the future is going to be?
Yeah, well, I think it was, I want to say it wasn't surprising, but it was, but wasn't at the same time. I think everybody was planning on going up till the very last minute. And I think when the COVID surge hit, it's, we used it before, but it's another perfect storm in this environment we're in, along with everything else everybody's facing. But there are a lot that have canceled and also geared back, only sending one or two people rather than maybe a quorum of 10. But I'm not sure. I guess the big thing that's up in the air is who's going to go from the visitation side. That I don't know. I think that's kind of a ball in the air question that most of us are asking. But like you said, we are both going out there. We will be speaking. Fingers crossed. I'm truly hoping that I walk out on stage for the first live presentation since the first prior COVID in 2020 and have a full house. But I don't know. Same as you, we don't know. Looking forward to the panel we're doing together, along with Ken Kelly and Michelle Boykin of Rackley, and I think that's going to be a great panel for what's going on in the industry. But we'll see. Hopefully, we get a full house.
Yeah, our panel discussion, I would be shocked if that's not the one of the most attended, because for our listeners, that's on the material issue, material availability, delays, price increases, cutting edge topic with the latest information on it. And we were able, thank you to Brand Data Informa, who was kind of able to allow us to maneuver that discussion to more current topics, which was, I think pertinent for the issues that we've got now. Along the lines of COVID, on our legal side, we've had more and more phone calls from contractors that are looking to now mandate vaccination policies. When the vaccines first came out, everyone was real touchy-feely. We're not going to mandate any of these things. We care about people's feelings, all this kind of stuff. Now that it's from an economic perspective, it's destroying production. It's not just that, but there's increased PTO, sick leave. It's a nightmare. And then not to mention the safety issue, right? You've got an issue there. So we've had more and more contractors turn to us and say, Trent or our team, we want, vaccination policies. In that regard, we went to our shop, shopcotney.com. We put up a mandatory vaccination policy that's there for purchase. But it's difficult to navigate these issues. It is. I understand the politics. I understand the morale related issues, but look, I'm a business owner, and I also understand the problems with having this cut into production, and the fact that a lot of customers are demanding that crews be vaccinated. So, John, what are you hearing, I guess, on the consulting side?
Yeah, same thing. I think, we had this conversation probably 4 or 5 months ago where we thought we were coming out of the backside of COVID, which we now know we're not. We're kind of in another part of the tunnel, I think. There it was about going to be vaccinated, but it was a touchy issue, how many people are going to do it. Right now, pretty much hearing across the board, it's coming down for the largest corporations and coming right on down the line where it's going to be mandatory vaccinations. So what that means is if you're in the crew and you're working for a contracting company, roofing company, or any other for that matter, you're not going to work on any of their properties without being vaccinated. So it's not just going to be employees of these companies. It's going to be anybody that you go to service their roof. They're not going to let you on unless you show proof of vaccination. So it's coming. I think we're now in a switch zone from a questionable 50-50, what is going to be, to I think you're going to see as each month of this goes by, or probably each week for that matter, you're going to start to see more and more companies come out with mandatory vaccine policies.
Yeah, and John, you and I are both vaccinated. I'm vaxxed to the max, and the reason, my rationale for doing it was that I traveled too much, and I just can't risk being down for a prolonged period of time, right? And I get the politics, I get the feelings on both sides, but I think as we kind of move through this, we're going to see more and more business owners look at the impact it has on, paid time off, on production capability. And I think you're going to start seeing more and more of these things, regardless of what you think about it, politically.
Agreed. I mean, you look even at a crew, or you're looking at your admin staff. If somebody gets sick, you're losing at least a week. I don't care what the symptoms are, hopefully they're not any sicker than that. You're losing a week. You got 15, 20 people. I mean, you're talking losing a month to 2 months worth of production out of a year when you start to get that up. A lot of that's going to become unrecoverable here at some point.
Yeah, it's going to be an ongoing issue, and I hate to say it, but I think it's going to get a lot worse. I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, it's going to fizzle out in September." I don't think so. I don't. Maybe I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be something that we as an industry are going to have to continue to navigate. So,
well, it's a good point you're taking, Trent. Opinion-wise, I mean, every time we've sat and thought it was going to be over as a society, this thing has come back with vengeance to the next level. So until it's completely gone, I think we got to be prepared.
Yep, absolutely. So, John, I want to turn to the next subject, which is E-Verify. We had a couple of real hot button issues come up this week that I think are worth talking about. And, just to give our audience sort of a clue as to what that is. Federal project, contractor goes on there, winning bidder, gets the job. As part of that requirement, everybody knows if you're doing federal work, there's all kinds of heightened stuff. You got to do Davis-Bacon, wage reporting. You've got to follow the FAR regulations. There's a lot of different things that you've got to do, but one of the requirements is usually E-Verify, right? Not just for you, but for your subs as well. In this particular instance, there was a contractor that was concerned about the legitimacy of his employees. And yeah, he's got, he was shown the proper documentation that was required, but there's always sort of that gut check. Do you really want to know for certain? And, he asked it, he's like, well, what do we do? How do we go about doing it? So for our listeners, this is a complex area of the law, but there are some things that you need to understand. If you are choosing to E-Verify, and there are some of you that are in states that require it, here in Florida, there was a law that was recently passed, which for some public work, there is a E-Verify requirement, or there are other options if you're not doing that. But if you are in one of the states that doesn't have it, it's not otherwise required, you can E-Verify just your crew that is going to be doing the federal work and every employee that you hire after that, okay? Or an alternative is you can consider creating a separate company that just does federal work, okay, where you are minimizing the number of people that have to go through E-Verify. So it is your choice once you do it, but at a minimum, that crew has to be E-Verified, and anybody that you hire after that crew, which is an interesting nuance of the law. It is before you get into federal work, make sure you know what you were doing. Okay. Don't jump in, don't cannonball into federal work. You need to really take it a step at a time because you can get burned pretty quick with the additional regulation. John, did you work on any federal projects, and what's your experience there?
Yeah, and it wasn't just the being a federal project as far as being government controlled. We actually did throughout my career a lot of work for contractors that built things for the federal government, or they had federally funded into their projects, and they required it as well. So they followed the same thing. So yep, is exactly what you said. The crews had to submit everything in. They got to e-verify the crew, and and on top of that too, you got to be careful and watch out too. It's not just e-verify. Sometimes they're doing criminal background checks. They got to have service. Sometimes they do it all. So it's one of those we've talked about in one of the prior ones. Read your contract and understand what you're getting into before you sign on that dotted line.
It's good advice. So, John, guess what time it is?
I bet you it's question time.
It's question time. So I'm going to go over to my stack over here, and we'll see what's on top. Let me see here. I think you will enjoy this one, John. This one I think I've got some comments, but I think this is primarily you. So this one is from William, and the question is if you're running, let's see if I can summarize it. If you are, let's say you're a contractor and you've got a bookkeeper or someone that is managing your books in your office, what kind of SOPs or oversight should you have to ensure that everything's being done correctly?
Well, you put your basic SOPs in where you have your closeout meetings, you do your financial review meetings. But one thing that I've always found out over the years is especially in accounting, you think you got the right SOPs in place, but sometimes there's always a way that it ends up going off. What I mean by that is make sure your filings are all done correctly, make sure everything's up to snuff, and check some of the smaller items. It's always good to have an internal audit. And I know we do that, and I've done that at other companies where we always have someone else doing an audit, and sometimes you will find mistakes, but you're better off finding them yourself and correcting them than you are someone else finding them. So make that part of your SOP, and I guess that's when, so SOPs are great, put it in place for how you do everything, but part of your SOP needs to be, especially in accounting and bookkeeping, you want to have an internal audit process. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It's just another set of eyes to do a second check, whether it's quarterly, monthly, or, depending on how much, you're doing in different things. But I definitely recommend that.
Yep, I think that's good advice. And the other thing that I would say is that in addition to internal audits, it's always good to have a third party outside, especially for, year-end accounting, things like that, just to double check what your internal team is doing. It's sort of a belt and suspenders approach. And that way you've got at least some certainty that either what you've got is good or it isn't. So the key thing is like John said, you find something, correct it. One of the things that you will, for the listeners out there that are just starting their businesses or they're just moving through it, it's always what you don't know that comes to get you. So as you're going through things, I experienced this plenty of times where you learn that there was some special something that needed to be done in a certain way, or something paid or something, and you don't find out till you get that notice, right? But as soon as you get that, it's the last time that happens. So the key is just being prompt, being aggressive. Don't put your head in the sand, and those checks and balances are imperative. So with that, we are going to end it. I'd like to thank all of our listeners as usual. If you got any questions for us, please submit them. We are getting to them, so you can send it to tcotney@cotneycl.com for me. And John, how can they get you?
Get me at jkenney@cotneycl.com.
Great. Well, thank you guys. We'll see you next time for another episode of Lawn Mortar.
Thank you. Take care.